Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed and we are learning about the conditions for the transmission of the cause of our problems. The condition for the transmission of the Pathologos. What things had to be in place for us to learn the fundamental false belief about ourself and reality that we unknowingly play out for the remainder of our lives. We play out a dialectic between this false, unsuspected false belief and our image of ourselves. It becomes our mask, it becomes our mannerisms, it becomes the way that we talk to people and ourselves, till eventually we identify with it. And maybe even pass it on to another person. Keep the what they call the family curse, the family sickness going. We spend our life seeking to find conditions where we can cosplay as the knower. Difficult because no one gives a crap about dumb opinions. You go to school to learn understanding, but other than that, who cares about your dumb opinions? Normally people only care if it's a challenge to their own. And they get angry. But that's why most people have kids. They don't know any better. So you can play the knower role. Of course, we talk about in this channel how the soul's urge for actual knowing must be a condition of our soul for it to be misused in this way, telling us something about our real destiny. But also telling us the conditions for how the imitation, the image of knowingness can affect us so significantly. Last time we talked about how we are trapped in our mask and being stuck in ruinous behavior can bewilder us. When we reflect on our lives and how we've been stuck in these kind of cycles that we call fate. We talk about how there's no opportunity for growth. It's stagnant. And it's also the model for justice and beauty against which we judge all else. So you want a beautiful wife or husband? This is going to be the model. So people say, oh, you end up marrying someone just like your mum or your dad. Here's why. Okay, and we ask the question, so how come those people who live over there, how come they have such a terrible idea of justice, but they all have it? And those people who live over there have a different idea of justice. Here's why. Why don't people learn truth about justice? By the way, that's called Platonic philosophy. Why aren't people doing that? Well, we talked about how the urge towards a likeness that imitation provides, the urge that we have to be like our what we are imitating is more primitive than our desire. What does that mean? Well, it helps us understand why people would spend their whole lives blindly and loyally defending the idea of justice that they happen to be born into, even though they can see babies born in that country, babies born in that religion, babies born in that society have different ideas of justice, and they're all wrong. It only takes a few moments to ask the question, well, hang on a second, where did I get my idea of justice? Why do I think I'm the one who's got it figured out? I haven't gone to school to learn justice. But I do have a desire that people are just. So, how do we make sense of this irrational and immature way of relating to self and humanity? It's the urge. The urge for imitation is more primitive and thus more powerful than our desire for actual truth, making Pathologos more powerful even than enlightenment. Something that we need to understand, because you are in it too. We all are. Until we learn this. Okay, so by saying we are all in it, we are saying it's a universal condition for being alive, for being a human, and possibly other intelligent species too. I don't know about that, but it's definitely part of the human condition. The urge to cosplay as knowing by imitating the stagnant model presented to us in our childhood is more powerful than the desire for actual truth, which would require two things: purifying that false belief and perfecting your understanding in the study of the Logos, which we can get through Platonic philosophy. Thankfully, it survived. There's about 1,000 years of study in Platonic philosophy that has been lost to the Pathologos, the counterattack of people against understanding the Logos, and many a philosopher has been murdered, many a university has been burnt down, many a library and its books have been burnt to ashes. But thankfully we have some surviving texts of Plato outlining the work of Socrates, who is able to share the Logos, and thankfully we have the Balboa translations, which are actually accurate for the first time in English history. So that would be the study to actually learn the truth about justice. But how many people are going through those two things? The study in the truth, perfection, and the removal of what's false, purification. Why is the large majority of people instead more dedicated to blindly defending their imitation from childhood? My dad can beat up your dad. My mother was a saint. We are the chosen people. I know because it's common sense. I learnt from the School of Hard Knocks. The School of Hard Knocks had been doing nothing other than knocking into your brain, your mind really, knocking into you the justification of the same beliefs that you learned from when you were a kid. You haven't been learning in the School of Hard Knocks. You've been bolstering your sickness. You're becoming more entrenched in your sickness, identifying with it. So what? Well, it's important to understand, because humanity can reflect ourselves. Therefore, if more people in the world are willing to fight and die for their ignorance, instead of actually going through what would be rational, discovering what you're carrying, reflecting on where you learnt it, seeing if it's true, if it's not, getting rid of it, and doing the work to learn what is true. The same thing that we do for other things. You want to learn how to fly a plane, you got to find out what false beliefs you have about how planes work. Hey, maybe you had a juvenile childhood belief that planes fly through magic because you loved Harry Potter. Well, you can't do that and also become an actual pilot. You have to discover that you're carrying that. Hello, welcome to the chat. You have to do the work of purifying that false belief. And at the same time, you have to go to aviation school and develop an understanding of the truth of how to fly the plane. Why do we understand that, but fail to apply that to what is most important? Truth, justice, being. That's the question that we've seen in the text already. Why can we be otherwise? Hey, yeah, good to see you too. Why can we, talking to the chat, why are we so irrational and immature when it comes to what is most important? Well, that's what we're reading now. Another way of asking that question is, what are the conditions for us developing this kind of sickness we call the pathologos? No, it's nothing to do with your diet. Nope. Nope. It's a primitive urge to imitate what appears to be truth and knowingness. Why not? Because it's not what we put in our body that affects us, it's what we carry in our minds. And as we've been reading, there's a certain condition where our parents put on a big show as they show themselves in a rare way, giving the appearance of care, giving the appearance of love, and they treat you in a certain kind of way that you come to a conclusion about yourself. So you made the decision that made sense. It made sense of all of the irrationality you saw around you. Kind of like how we're trying to make sense of the irrationality we see in our world. Why are we so irrational as a species? Well, when we're young, we come to a belief about ourselves and reality that makes sense, but of the irrationality, the way that people are, the way that they act, the way that they treat each other, their roles. But of course, it's not true because they were ignorant. But that realization that just because our parents look, now it's not all chemicals, that's the opposite of chemicals. That's called reductionism, reducing the soul to its physical equivalence. No, this is to do with the soul's desire for truth and knowingness, which is metaphysical, so it's not physical at all. Only what gets in the way of our soul's desire to understand and know what exists in being is someone who has the appearance, someone who appears like truth, which exists in being before the physical world, the cause of the physical world. Metaphysics, being. They appear to be telling the truth. They appear to be loving. And the way they treat you appears to be justice. So the appearance takes the place of what we're actually born here to reach. Being, which is non-physical, which is great because it's a kind of learning that is not dependent on this particular physical incarnation, which only lasts less than 100 years. So philosophy, Platonic philosophy, is developing an understanding and experience of the realm of being. That would be the study of what actually is justice. But very few people do that. Instead, we stay blindly loyal to the appearance of justice and knowingness that was modeled by our parents. And we're willing to fight and die for it, even though it's literally the cause of the problems that we live. It eventually causes our illnesses. It causes our persona, our mask that keeps us trapped. And eventually we identify it. We identify with it. So we kind of live a walking dialectic between this false belief from this particular scene from our childhood. Our life becomes a dialectic with it, between that and our image of ourselves. So our job, if we have integrity, is to reflect on the problems that we have, learn the art of philosophical midwifery, purify our false ideas of truth, justice, beauty, knowingness, and do the work to actually learn it, just like we would learn how to fly a plane. No different. Makes sense, right? In the chat, I've done a lot of DMT with the lessons I received through doing so be metaphysical. Yeah, that it's not guaranteed, but psychedelics can trigger an initiation experience, an experience of the soul separating from the body and experiencing the realm of being. Again, it's not guaranteed. Some people just see shapes and colors. Some people leave their physical body but stay in the physical world. Some people call that astral traveling. But for some people, If they're fortunate, they can have an experience of the realm of being. And I've even heard of people who have even gone beyond that to experience the cause even of being, the self. Yeah, there's no time there. That's right. Right, and space. So no time and space. Because time and space are the characteristics of the physical world. So we can call it eternity. No me. That's the trick. So in chat, having an experience of something beyond and prior to time and space, no me. Now, when you say no me, you are talking about your pathologos, your image of yourself that you've been carrying your life. What we are learning in the text is where it comes from. Where did we first learn our image of self and reality? Because in these experiences you discover, it's not me. Sometimes people call that the ego death, but a more accurate term is pathologos. Or, so it's the dropping of the mask or persona, but the mask or the persona has been what we've been developing in a relationship or dialectic with our pathologos. And suddenly you have an experience, I wasn't that all along. Now, the thing about these experiences is, yes, no legs, no arms and stuff like that. Yes. If you're out of the body, then you don't have your physical body. And by the way, if you still exist in some way without a physical body, would it make sense to say that you are just your body chemicals? You are just physical chemicals? You are just your brain? Well, you've had an experience that tells you that you definitely are not. A collective reality. That's tricky. I think collective isn't the right word, because collective implies that it's kind of like we are all agreeing on it. Most human beings don't have an awareness of that because they haven't done philosophical midwifery to remove their false beliefs about reality. It's more like so in philosophy we call it transcending or experiencing a greater whole. So it's collective in that it's the whole of which all are parts. So we call it a oneness. I mean, depending, I don't know what you specifically experience, but there are levels. And when you come back into your body, with that experience, you've suddenly been like, wow, I'm really not this mask that I thought I was. Reality isn't just physical the way that Ma and Pa told me it is. And that's why I need to get lots of money and own lots of property. That's what it means to be successful. And that doesn't make sense if I have an eternal being that can exist beyond the physical world. That doesn't seem like a good way of using my time. Maybe my first teachers were ignorant. So, usually we don't ask that question. Usually when people have this experience, they find the effect of their pathologos diminishing for a time, because they've suddenly awoken to a higher level of reality. I'm not this. All of these thoughts and worries and near-death experiences, similar sort of thing, all these thoughts and worries, all of these things I identified with, it's not real. So this voice telling me that I'm stupid because my head's too big or I'm too fat or whatever, whatever it is, whatever your specific pathologos that diminishes yourself is, loses its power for a time. Now, the key word there is for time. Without philosophical midwifery, eventually the pathologos returns and you're back to business as usual. And so our question has been, and we're reading, why? How can pathologos, our false belief that becomes our false image and our way of being, how can that be more powerful even than an enlightenment experience of reality itself beyond space and time, beyond my physical body, How can Pathologos be more powerful than truth? That's what we read last time. So where we are in the text. The urge towards likeness, we read, is more fundamental and more primitive than our desire for truth. This is important. What does that mean? That means it doesn't matter how many experiences like that you've had. Doesn't matter if you've been given a title of guru or priest or pastor or imam or whatever spiritual title. It doesn't matter what title you've been given. If you haven't done philosophical midwifery to uncover and remove the false beliefs you're carrying, you are not free. You are not free from your problems. I once felt my dad, that I never met and he died when I was 6, convey that everything is going to be just fine. In a DNT experience. That's interesting. Did you get any questions from that experience? Does it puzzle you? Have you got any questions that you'd like answered about that? Because it's so standard and easy, and we as humans are lazy. Well, lazy. Lazy can be used really dismissively. Like the rich people say, hey, the reason why I'm rich and you're poor is because you're all lazy. I don't like the word lazy. I don't think it gets to understand. It's a good way of vilifying people for being people. For example, if I often had teachers who tried to get me to do stupid, dumb things and I didn't want to do it, they'd call me lazy. Is it because I'm lazy or I wasn't inspired? Or maybe if there was something I really wanted to do, then I'm no longer lazy, but I still might have blocks. Is it fair to say I'm lazy because I'm blocked from doing the thing I want to do? Of course not. So the goal isn't personally significant enough, number one, or you have a block because your goal is personally significant. And if you seek your personally significant goals, you will surface your Pathologos blocks. So why is it still there? Well, you got to learn philosophical midwifery. That's what we're doing here. Truth seekers in North America are usually deemed as mentally ill. Yeah. I've been called mentally ill by my family because I seek truth. Hey, why don't you just toe the line and stay stuck in the ignorance that we are all suffering from? That's how we are bound together. We all have our roles. And you can be just like me, just like I was just like my dad, and he was just like his dad, and so on and so on. Perpetual cycle of ignorance and stupidity. Yeah, so when somebody starts acting different, you can call them mentally ill, you can laugh at them, you can kick them out of the society, kick them out of the family, or like Socrates, who did this, you can kill them. These are all called counterattacks. We want to be aware of when they come up within us. If we are seeking truth, then that primitive urge, being more fundamental and powerful, may try to surface and defend. We saw that in the text as well, the counterattack. Success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Interesting. My whole family thinks I'm mentally ill because I'm so far out compared to them. Yeah. Now you might want to ask them who their teacher of what the health and excellence of the mind is, because the study of the illness of the mind is philosophical midwifery. The study of the health and excellence of the mind is Platonic philosophy. So are they qualified? Have they spent their time doing those things? Just as they're not qualified to give medical advice unless they've gone to medical school. So are they saying that, are they actually thinking consciously from understanding and experience, or are they being a slave to their ignorance? Are they just imitating the same people who did it to them? Imitation. Ah, that's one of the qualifications. Yep, the midwifery. That's what we're here for. To learn the art of midwifery, to surface and remove our false images of ourself and reality that block us from our most meaningful goals. And if we are successful, we use our freedom to, well, you can do what you want, but I would strongly encourage you to use that freedom to pursue the truth of what you have removed from the throne. The truth of justice, the truth of beauty, the truth of self, the truth of reality. Yeah. And with an understanding of the Logos, you'll be able to do the same things for a Taoist and a Buddhist. So in chat, somebody's asking, what about Taoism and Buddhism? Yeah, they too would suffer pathologos, and which would limit them in their progression along the Logos. The Logos being the path of understanding to being and beyond to the self. So the path of dianoia, or understanding being in the self, that's the Logos. And confirming it in the direct experience of the Logos, that's nous. Integrating the two together, that's the art that we're developing, like Socrates. Oh, of course. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for having some good questions. So we can look at people who have different problems, including Buddhists and Taoists, and say, oh, okay, let's see if we can reflect on the nature of your problem. If you're interested in playing the game, if you're interested in escaping fate and being free, and equally so, we can say the same thing about our Logos. How far along the Logos have you come? I see you have some experience in meditation because you're a Buddhist. Have you read Socrates? Maybe it's time to read Socrates. Why? Because experiences alone are not enough. You have to understand your experience. And of course, there are different depths of experience. A Taoist enlightenment is different from a Buddhist enlightenment. Why? Well, because there's different levels. Why not understand them all? Just like if you're a doctor, there are different levels of illness. You need to kind of understand them all, or get an idea of them all. Same thing with the excellence of the body. So doctor would be like midwifery, moving from sickness to health. But once you're healthy, or in midwifery free, you need to go to a personal trainer. Just because you're not sick doesn't mean you have the excellence of your body. Now you got to go play some sport, or go to the gym, or do something like that. And there are different levels. The Tao of Pooh. How did you find that book? Yeah, so you could say the Platonic philosophy, it's full circle. Yeah, it is. You could say that philosophy is demystifying what has been kept in mystery. Oh, enlightenment is mysterious. You have to sit under a waterfall. You have to go to this ashram for 50 years and pray to this deity. No, you don't. You can understand it like anything else. Now the question is, what kinds of people make the claim that it's not understandable? Because the point at which somebody declares you can understand up to here, but you can understand no further, that's evidence of the Pathologos. The Pathologos functions to block our development along the Logos. So for a dumb person, you can understand how to get a beer at the shop, but you can't understand how magnets work. Magnets are a miracle. That's the meme from the Insane Clown Posse. Now, halfway intelligent people realize that you can understand how magnets work. But then you might get like someone who goes to a Christian thing, or you can't understand God. You can't understand heaven. That's where they're blocked. And then you might have a Buddhist say, well, you can understand heaven, but you can't understand the self. That's where they're blocked. At what point do you want to draw the line and say, this is how far the Logos goes? Now, if you're free, then you don't have to draw a line, which is great, because then you can understand every spiritual tradition, every way of thinking, every experience possible, and even ask the question, well, what's, after all of these experiences, what's having the experience? Now you're in the first hypothesis of Parmenides. Someone told you to check out the Tao of Pooh at church. But that's another question. If we are able to understand the nature of problems through midwifery and fourth dimensional thinking, nice, and we're able to understand the Logos, what are all of the levels of understanding and experience, then the next question we can ask is, how do you transition? Maybe you're at a certain level of the Logos where you think there is such a thing as a realm of being, or God, if you want to call it God, but we can't experience it. The closest we can go is to go to church and feel like we're a part of a group when we sing and we say, yay, Jesus, or yay, Allah, or whatever it is. That's a certain level of development. Now, in your experience, you were at a church. That's as far as some people get. But then someone can come along and say, hey, read this book about the Tao, or read this book about meditation. And then that person can read and be informed about a level of actual participation in the divine, an experience of something divine or godlike or metaphysical or heaven, whatever words they're familiar with. So that's a transition from staying, you still think there is a divine, but the greatest you can get is feeling like a part of a greater whole, like a team sport. Because that's a kind of oneness when you're in a group. And then someone can introduce you to meditation or tell you to read this book on the Tao, and then you can go, wow, I never knew you could actually experience it. That's a transition from fourth hypothesis to the third hypothesis. And we can ask those questions when we understand the Logos. We can ask the question, what are the transitions you can make? Right. Realizing the big bag we carry around even needs to be unpacked or carried around anymore. Right, so we are carrying around false beliefs about ourselves, and our job in midwifery is to give it back to who it actually belongs to. Who do we get it from? And let's see if we can give it back. Now, what's interesting is if you do get into the Parmenides and understand the Logos, and you can recognize people at church are in the fourth hypothesis, people who then get told, hey, read this book, and they have an experience. Maybe that's the third hypothesis. Then we can ask the question, how do we transition? Because the Parmenides doesn't give you the transitions. Even in the Buddhist Logos, the closest thing to the Logos in Buddhism is the 10 ox herding pictures, and they describe levels of enlightenment, stages, called the 10 ox herding pictures. If you want to check them out, Google them. But again, no transitions. So one of the great puzzles is, how do we jump? How do we make a transition from whatever level we're on to the next one? Well, one possibility, and this can be a question we carry as we read, is maybe it's this guy up here. Maybe philosophical midwifery is a way of transitioning. And then we can ask the question, how come Plato didn't include it in the Parmenides, or how come Parmenides didn't talk about it? It's another level of question that we can have. Right, yes, don't give up. And hopefully if you develop an art, then maybe if you stay with philosophical midwifery, you'll learn how to artfully address your teacher, your mum, and say, hey, by the way, this is what happened. This is what you're pretending to do. This is how you're actually functioning. This is what it's called. This is how it affected my life for as long as I believed it. But this is what it actually is. And by the way, I'm not playing anymore. Have it back. And here's a question for you. Where did you learn it? Who were you imitating when you played this bullshit on me? Did you go through something similar? See how it goes. And the greater we learn the art of philosophical midwifery, the better we can have these conversations. And it can be with them in person, or sometimes they've passed away and you can imagine having that conversation. Sometimes people who come up in your life that are like them, you can talk to them. Hey Jed, did you do a video on the different hypotheses? So far, we've done a video on the introduction to the Parmenides, which is a lot of fun, because that's young Socrates as a 19-year-old, a burgeoning philosopher, with a problem. A very common problem. He has a problem with understanding the realm of being. He uses physical language to talk about the realm of being. And Parmenides is like, son, no. And Parmenides introduces him to the dialectic. And then Socrates says, oh, that's interesting, this dialectic thing. You say I have to learn the dialectic if I ever want to reach truth and being? And if I don't learn it, it'll be a tragedy in my life because I will never reach truth? Can you give me an example of the dialectic? But don't do it on the regular things like beauty and justice that we normally do the dialectic on. Do it on the self. So, thankfully, Socrates was that kind of a person, even at 19. He asked the highest possible question. Do a dialectic on yourself, please, Parmenides, because that's beyond even beauty, justice, being. So, and then Parmenides says, okay, I'll do a dialectic. I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff happening. He says, get out of here, kid, I'm too old, that's too hard. But eventually Socrates, he gets convinced to do it. The first hypothesis is the hypothesis of Parmenides' self. And then and that's what we've covered. We've gone through that on the channel. And then we have yet to get into the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth. We've only done the first. But we took a detour after doing the first to get into the Phaedo, because the second gets quite technical. Because the second is describing the brilliant light of being, Taoist enlightenment, everything all at once. Mind knowing itself in the highest possible way. Bliss. And there's a lot going on because it's the paradigm for everything else that follows in our physical world. So it's very involved. It's the longest hypothesis, I believe. So, heavy stuff. So we took a break to jump into the Phaedo, where Socrates is at the end of his life, his last day, and he tells us what philosophy really is. He calls it the art and practice of dying and being dead. Now it's a crazy thing to say. His friends were like, yeah, I think people who would agree that philosophers deserve to die. Because regular people, think that philosophy is useless. We're not making money, we're not getting famous. So yeah, philosophers deserve to die. And Socrates says, yeah, they're right, but they don't know why they're right. Because in order to experience reality, you have to separate from your physical senses. Separating the soul from the physical body is death. So philosophers want death more than anyone, and if they're doing their work in midwifery and Platonic philosophy, they deserve it the most. And he talks about, he demonstrates the dialectic too. He gives a dialectic to define philosophy, and then he demonstrates it in his conversations with his friends, highlighting the importance of learning the dialectic and mastering the art of the logos and not just believing. He foreshadows, he predicts all the problems we're facing right now in our world 2,500 years before it happened. Says, yeah, this is the sort of people who will emerge. Anti-logos people, debate bros, people who think they're clever because they say, you can't know truth. It's all a matter of opinion, and I'm cleverest because I know that. They will reject being, they will reject the logos. So, and they'll trick you. So don't even believe what I'm saying, says Socrates in the Phaedo. Understand it for yourself. Learn the art. Otherwise, you can have the worst defect of the soul. If you're not using the art of the logos to judge people and judge arguments, then you might believe a rubbish argument, and then when you find out it's rubbish and you've been betrayed, you'll go, the universe is awful, or you can't understand everything. And you can't understand what's important. So you'll end up hating the logos. And he says that's not the real cause. The cause is you haven't mastered the art of the logos. And that's what you're here for. And he goes and talks about what happens when you die, the different places you go, depending on how well you mastered the art of the logos, which is our job. And he said, look, your job here is to purify your false beliefs about the logos, self and reality, and master artfully the truth of those things. And see it for yourself. Actually, go there, check it out, see what happens in the afterlife before they bury you. So philosophy is dying many times before they finally bury you. So after the Phaedo, we realized at the end of the Phaedo, there was a big boss at the end, and we needed to read the text a second time because Socrates says, hey, by the way, there are levels to philosophy. You read it more than once in a different way. So we started our second reading and we realized, okay, let's learn more about this dialectic. The first way you read the Phaedo, he says, is just remember it and repeat it. So we have that podcast. Watch that podcast every day. There's like 70 episodes. That's called philomathesis, the love of learning. And then if you discover the dialectic within the text, you go through it again. Only you look for the dialectic everywhere you can. That's the exercise of philosophy. Then after you do that, there's another level of reading called philophronesis. So philosophers want to get to phronesis. So at the start of our second reading, we stopped and thought, hang on a second, let's learn more about the dialectic before we do our second reading of the Phaedo. So then we took a pause of that, and then we jumped into the Meno. The Meno is someone who thinks he knows about virtue and wisdom and doesn't, but is convinced he does. And he asks Socrates, hey, you know how we both know what virtue is? Do you think you can teach it to people? And Socrates is like, whoa, can you talk about its qualities, whether or not it's teachable, if you don't even know what it is? Let's discuss what virtue is. And he goes into depth to talk about the dialectic. It's actually hidden. Unless you're reading the Balboa translation, you'll never see it. So we're in the Meno now. But eventually, we're going to get back to the, once we have an understanding of the dialectic under our belts, and under maybe even some experiences of the realm of being, because we've read the Phaedo in the second kind of way, then we can take our understanding of the dialectic and our experience of being back into the second hypothesis, because the second hypothesis is about the realm of being, the greatest possible experience, and it's being explained in the highest possible way of understanding anything, the dialectic. So it's the dialectic and experience together. That's the second hypothesis. That's where we're heading in the channel. Let me catch up with the chat. Yes. So why didn't Freud do what? Why didn't Freud do midwifery and philosophy? I don't know. You have to ask that guy. Often when people get PhDs, it becomes very hard for them to learn anything new when their paycheck is dependent on them being an expert or already knowing. But I don't know what Freud's deal was. Obviously, he had a Pathologos. I mean, his Pathologos, the way it's expressed is kind of obvious for a lot of people, that it's kind of a joke. He had a sexy mum, let's just say it that way. I've taken a few DBT courses. I don't know what that is. Two opposing ideas can live harmoniously. I think that's a contradiction in your dialectic. Okay, so we're learning the dialectic. How do you actually structure thinking? And if you're structuring your thinking in that way, it happens to be the same way everything is structured. It's the paradigm for even reality. It looks like this. You want to understand something? Like you want to understand the nature of beauty because you're reading a Socratic text about beauty itself. Again, not a physical beauty, beauty itself in the realm of being. You say, hey, if beauty exists, is side A, and then you also have to do side B on a different page if beauty doesn't exist. And then there are 4 categories. There's only 4 categories in the system of understanding called the dialectic. But then there's also 4 categories if it isn't. That's what we've been learning on the channel, the dialectic. Felt like I've had a dream with you explaining these things before. Oh, cool. I'm a dream character. I always suspected I was a dream character. I've heard this before. Interesting, I just can't put my finger. That is interesting. A lot of people who get into philosophy talk about a similar thing. They hear this, or they hear Pierre Grimes or someone like that talking in this way, and they say, this is very familiar. I feel like I know you, or you're a family member. I've heard this before, or maybe I've even given this lecture myself before. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it feels familiar. That feeling has gotten a lot of people into philosophy. So that is a puzzle. I hope you turn that into a question and carry that with some wonder. And if you figure out where that comes from, please let me know when you figure it out, because I've had that puzzle for 20 years. I think people like the mental coach are pathologists. Oh, okay, dialectical behavioral therapy. Right, so so what we are actually learning in philosophical midwifery is the new paradigm for what we call psychotherapy. So all of the modern advancements in psychotherapy have been people taking bits and pieces from this book. Because this book outlines the paradigm, meaning it should be the text that you study. Just like there's only one way of flying a plane, there should be one way of understanding human problems and resolving it, if it's an actual science or science is the wrong word because science only is the physical. If it's an art, if it's actually a discipline. That's why the book is called should be called The New Paradigm for Understanding Human Problems. It's the only form of psychotherapy that has been scientifically, empirically validated as well. At the end of the book, there are all the validation studies, which we could get into, but I don't think we're going to care, because once we understand the cause of problems, it's obvious that it's the paradigm. That's what we're doing. Let's jump into the text. So last time, the Pathologos becomes our ideal. So, the Pathologos only continues so long as we accept it to be reality, number one. So we have to think it's real, and we have to believe it's just. So when we answer the Pathologos, we have to say, hey, by the way, it's not real and it ain't just. We can't accept a reality that's not just. Okay? The parental figures reveal themselves. It becomes the ideal that we imitate as a child. We're not even aware of it. The power of the lesson extends to our inner life, our dreams, fantasies. It shapes our attitudes. It shapes how we react to reality. It's our ideal. We unknowingly mold ourselves to it, so we're kind of a walking, living dialectic, becoming like. So the whole idea of dialectic is, if you apply this to one of the aspects of being called the ideas, you're reflecting on, like, if beauty exists, now is means exists in being, you're defining it, you're talking about how it functions, you're seeing how it applies to other things, you're focusing on this thing, but you're focusing on it and imagining it. Imagination, sustained focus, this is meditation. But not only are you meditating, you're meditating in a rational, ordered way. By the way, that rational order has to come from somewhere. It comes from being, for it to be a true model. So you are meditating on it, singular focused, with openness and curiosity, imagining it, or if you've had the experience, remembering it, either or. These are things, this is what happens in meditation, but you are also becoming like it, because you are not just meditating on it, you are doing so in a rational, ordered way that is the same understandability or rationality of the thing itself. You're becoming like it. So a dialectic is a conversation between you and your object of focus. Being itself, beauty itself, justice itself, likeness itself, all of the things, all of the aspects of being that are the subjects of philosophy. Notice, philosophy isn't about the physical world. It's different aspects of being. So you are molding yourself to it. So what? Well, if this exists as a model, it has its distorted reflection. That's the Pathologos. We are molding ourselves unknowingly to the Pathologos ideal. Ideal to be imitated. Becoming like it. We are doing what we're supposed to be doing, a dialectical meditation. That's what life is, to make us like our object of meditation. The only problem is, the reason we have human problems is, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're doing what we're designed to be doing. We're only doing it on the wrong thing. We're doing it on the imitation. So our life is making us like what is negative, what is not true. You're a walking dialectic whether you like it or not. The only question you can really ask someone is, do you want to do it well? Do you want to do it consciously? Hey, you're in this game. You want to learn the game rules? And you want to know the goal of the game? Or do you want to be an NPC, but you're not even an NPC, because if you don't do this consciously, you're going to be acting negatively towards yourself and others you influence. So do you want to be a villain or a hero? That's really the question. And if you're watching this, you're on Team Hero. Okay, so why do we mold ourselves to it? There is a desire to imitate. It's an inner urge to be like what's being presented to us. An inner urge. Without this, we couldn't be like what we perceive as great. So our soul seeks to be like greatness, that we just said, only we are doing it towards the ideal. It's an inner urge. Without this, there would be no pathologos. Greatness and likeness are the conditions. There has to appear like and great. The gestures, expressions, attitude, displays at that moment become part of the self. They're taken on. You become like that. You pick up Ma and Pa's mannerisms, way of being, ways of acting, because you want to be great. If we didn't seek greatness, we would be living in a unjust world. There would be no motivation to help us understand the cause of our existence and the purpose of our existence and the nature of existence itself. There would be nothing motivating us to reach being and reality and self if we weren't seeking greatness. But it's also a double-edged sword, because it's the conditions for the pathologos. Because that seeking, that urge to be greatness is siphoned away into imitation. Okay, we are like a blind master craftsman. It's our psyche, because we're trying to transform ourselves by adapting another mask. We're crafting another person's mask. So we talk about giving the problems back. It's not our mask. But that's our persona. So in the chat, we talked about having a psychedelic experience where that persona wasn't there anymore. So where is me? I wasn't there. No, you were there. Where else were you? The persona wasn't there. Being unaware of the transformation. So we're a master craftsman in that we craft the mask that we put on ourselves becomes our persona, somebody else's mask, but we're blind in that we don't know we're doing it. The masks stay in place for our lifetime. So yeah. Might be worth getting rid of. And it's passed on to others. So not only do you suffer it your whole life, if you don't do midwifery, you also pass it on to others. So you're not just a innocent NPC, you're actually an enemy NPC. Because you're harming someone else. We don't recognize that these masks trap us into patterns of behavior that confound and bewildered us. Why do I keep sabotaging myself in this way? I'm confounded. These masks, yes. We don't see that the ruinous course of action is destructive to our highest ideals derived from such a simple seed. All of our problems, the ruinous actions we have, destructive to our highest goals and our highest ideals, come from such a simple seed in our youth. So simple. Reflection, we know that our repetitive behavior is imitative. Because, so we're imitation. Why is it imitation? There's no opportunity for improvement. When I teach guitar, often people start with imitation because they like to play songs. It's nice to play songs, it's fun. But we have to go beyond imitation because there's no opportunity for improvement. You can't do anything other than imitate someone who's already done it. You can't find your voice. You can't actually play music from yourself. Imitation, becoming like the model, striving to be accepted. So that's accepted as someone. So you want acceptance, but in a certain way. I need you to see me like this. Accept me like I'm just like my dad. No, that's the way I want you to accept me, not as anything else. Why? Because we are guided by an urge to become like what we accept as ideal or great. Likeness towards greatness. Again, principles of philosophy. Likeness. Likeness is one of the aspects of being. Fundamental ideas. It's one of the subjects in Parmenides. When he talks about within each of the hypotheses, one of the terms he describes is likeness. Another aspect of being is greatness. The powerful image of knowing. There we go, another one. Authority is established so it's within this powerful image. So why do Russians get Putin and Americans get Trump? They're both terrible people, functioning in terrible ways. Because it matches this image of knowing. That's where authority comes from. Like an Italian family. How do you know that someone knows? They're yelling. In a Japanese family, how can you tell that a parent knows? He's silent when he should be speaking. Opposites. Isn't it interesting? Right. But then we can ask, well, what's the true model of knowing? Well, maybe our author, who's able to see all this. Greatness is identified. Beauty and justice come together as the model against which to compare. Hey, you're not really beautiful unless you're like mom. You're not really knowing unless you're yelling like dad. And I've seen midwifery sessions where people are not paying attention to the midwife. And then suddenly the midwife starts yelling just like their model that they are in midwifery to uncover and remove. And all of a sudden they start listening. Well, actually, this guy might know what he's talking about. He's a knower. I can tell because he's yelling just like in my Italian family. And then the next midwife session, the same person, very quiet. Now, these are just personas. The midwife isn't speaking from a persona. It happens to be useful persona to put on because at that time, because it's the model against which all else is compared. Knowingness, beauty, and justice. Ever wondered why people marry someone just like their ma and pa? It's your model of beauty. You listen to people who you might pass 10 people in the street or 20 people in the street in a day. It's that one person who says that thing just like dad or cutting just like mum. That's the thing you pay attention to. That's the thing that's going to ruin your day. Why? Because that's knowing. You think that person knows. They don't. It's possible to see the difference between of each pathologos in terms of the qualities or virtues, the way that they're manifested. That's what we've been talking about. How does the Italian family manifest knowingness? How does the Japanese family manifest beauty? That's how you can see the differences. Why do Russians get Putin and Americans get Trump? The standards of behavior within the group, or the signs of being accepted within the group, are framed or structured around the appearance of these qualities. Hey, when you start talking in this way, then you're going to get accepted. Now you're one of us, mate. You're a true family member, mate, when you talk like this. That's an Australian accent. Once established, all players play within that standard, become like their roles. Family become identified with that role, finally become identified. So this is a standard, this is the game in which you play, this is how you want to be seen, this is how you get acceptance, this is the role you pick, and you play out. What's the role? Maybe I'm always a Cinderella, I'm always serving someone else. Maybe I'm always making jokes to distract from what's important. Whatever that role happens to be. And then eventually you identify with it. That's where it ends. You think that you are it. You're not it. And as we talked about today, people have had experiences out of body or meditation or psychedelic experiences. And they're like, oh shit, I'm not that thing. I can't see what I've identified with anymore. Yeah, because that's not actually real. Without this urge towards likeness that imitation provides, there'd be no pathologos. Urge is more fundamental and more primitive than desire. Each pathologos scene is unique because the model itself was unique. So everyone has a unique pathologos, but all of the causes and conditions are the same for everyone, which means it can be a study or a science or an art. Now, one of the questions we got earlier in the text is this formally psychotherapy or is it formally philosophy? And if it's actually philosophy, is then really no such thing as psychotherapy? It's just an aspect of philosophy? That's a question we've been carrying as we read. So that's where we are. Let's keep going. If parental figures only appear with this kind of uniqueness under circumstances that are unusual and rare, then that rare event gains greater importance and significance. The less they reveal of themselves, the more the need for that particular involvement. Finally, the more they reveal themselves in a particular way, the more significant it will be to discover the reason for that repetition. If the parental figures have a wide range of revealing themselves, if they have a wide range, then any single pathologos situation or circumstances will have less impact. What does that mean? Show yourself. Be yourself. That's what we're encouraging people to do on this channel. Show yourself. Whatever you're learning about yourself, using your highest vision from whatever you've been learning in the text, from whatever experiences you've had in meditation or other things, use that. And express yourself through the dialectic as best you can, using your highest vision and your highest understanding. Speak up and try and do it in a way that we're learning like from Socrates, to be like true greatness. The more that you reveal yourself in a variety of ways, hey, you like talking about food? Talk about food. You like the show? Talk about what you like in the show. You're happy and sad? Speak up. Why? Because if you're revealing yourself in all of these different ways and circumstances, then a single pathologos instant won't be as devastating for the kid. So, not only is it important to show yourself and to speak up, put logos on your being, because it's literally what you're here for, so it's more just to your soul and your existence, it's also more just to those people around you. By the way, the consequences of rejecting this message for the baby would mean calling into question the integrity of those appeared sincere and beautiful, making it impossible to continue to function as before. So this is the risk. If a child calls them out, hang on a second, this is not good. You're calling into question the integrity of your beloved, appearingly sincere and beautiful people. You can't go back to the old way of being anymore because you see it's based on a sham. To challenge the pathologos would require a courage and understanding. So notice, rejecting this message is what we're here to do. Now, we're trying to do it as adults. But even you can do it as a kid. It takes a special kind of person, though. To challenge the Pathologos would require a courage and understanding that is found only rarely, even among the mature. So very, very unlikely for a kid to do this, but possible, has been done. But even among us adults, the mature, who have some understanding, have left the house, have learned about the significance of courage and the virtues from our reading of Plato. We are in the rare. We are in the rare, among the rare few. We are special. So, keep up the good work if you're in this group. We need more people like you. We find sub-subjects do return to their parents and families and challenge the Pathologos. Return to their parents and families. Some subjects. In such cases, we find it takes a unusual level of commitment and courage to successfully challenge the family Pathologos, which is something we could not expect among the immature. Right, this is our ideal. So even among, I've been in this game for 20 years. I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of midwife talks. Among even the rare few who have discovered midwifery, even among the even rarer few who, having discovered midwifery, have taken up the courage, had the courage to take up the challenge, or maybe had a significant enough goal that they wanted to achieve, or a significant enough block that they couldn't handle living with anymore. So they have actually jumped in and did it. I've known people who've been been aware of midwifery for a long time and rarely do it. So it's even rarer to actually do it. Even among that rare of the rare, it takes an even rarer kind of person to have the level of commitment to excellence, to their soul, to their purpose, and courage. What's courage? Doing what is the Logos is saying should be done, even though it might not feel safe or feel right. That's why it requires courage. If it felt right and you understood it, then it would be normal. But it takes time. It takes work to get there. Eventually, it'll become normal. But at the start, it takes courage. You have to trust the Logos, even if it doesn't feel right. So even among the rare of the rare, this is even more rare. So if you're that sort of person, go for it. Join the community, join the Discord, join the Twitch and YouTube, and let us know how it goes. Share your success. Now, of that rare of the rare of the rare, an even rarer few realize, holy crap, this is so significant. It's been so significant for me having done this. Even the people who just dip their toes in, it's the most significant for them. In fact, it's so significant, that's kind of what scares them off. I'm going to go on even further and master this very art that benefited me. I'm going to master it myself. So of the rare few who have become aware of it, and by the way, if you're watching this, you're aware of it. So you can't pretend to be dumb about it. Of that rare people who've become aware of it, there's a smaller subsection who do it. And then, as we read here, takes an unusual level of commitment and courage to successfully challenge the Pathologos, so even smaller than that. And then we want to go on and say, hey, those people, keep going. Master the art. Become a midwife. Keep this tradition going. And If you're doing so, please join the community, join the Discord, join the YouTube and Twitch, and use your art. Help others. Help me. Help us. And help yourself by doing the real dialectic. Because instead of being in an unconscious dialectic with the false image of false belief about yourself that you then identify with at the end of, that's a dialectic, you are becoming like that false belief, identifying with it. Hey, practice the art of midwifery. Become like the actual ideal, actual greatness, Socrates, Pierre Rhymes. Make yourself like that. But we can't expect it amongst the babies, because we see how even rare it was among adults. Is the imposition possible at any time in one's life, or is there some time better for this imposition? Next question. Clearly, it is only when authorities still retain the image of authority in dependent relationships, most often in our youth, that events can produce the pathologos. So, you're stuck with these people. Can be devastating to challenge the way that you're challenge the integrity of those who appeared sincere and beautiful and you're dependent upon. So, when you're young and when the authorities still appear like they actually know stuff, until you realize they don't, they're just pretending. Eventually we all wake up, or hopefully as we mature, we wake up to that fact that they're just being cosplaying. Hey, imitating what their dad did to them, and so on and so on. So it's when they still have the image of authority, we're in a dependent relationship, often in our youth, that these events can produce the pathologos. These early events or scenes must include the sacrifice of what we know through our own personal experience. That's what you give up. So we're not just sacrificing our beloved images that happen to be false, but we're taking back something we lost. We're going back to where we left off. We're picking up what we left behind because we sacrificed something. We sacrificed something most dear. What we know, that we knew from our own personal experience. The drama that transmits the belief with such enormous consequences as the pathologos. The drama is the transmission. It transmits a belief. It has such enormous consequences. It literally becomes your life. Your whole life is now on a train tracks that we call fate, that Socrates calls the chains of fate. Like being chained in a prison. You can predict your entire life. Repeating cycles of failure, limiting you in your development. That's the enormous consequences of the pathologos. It comes through a drama, a certain scene. The pathologos hinges upon concealing from the child that the actors are acting out an act. We were just talking about that, weren't we? So when the authorities still have their image of authority, before you realize they're just bullshitting, they're cosplaying, they're pretending to know crap, they don't. You're too young to realize that. So, and they pretend, they conceal that they're actually putting on an act. They know that they are pretending. They've been seeking their whole life to play out this game. Oh, I finally get to be the bully. I finally get to sit on daddy's chair. No one cares about my dumb opinions, but my kids will. So I get to play this, hey, this internal voice that reflects my own ma and pa, that criticizes me, that makes me feel all these negative feelings, keeps me trapped in my problems, the voice of the Pathologos, their voice, I can finally get free of it, not by actually maturely learning the art and removing this voice by understanding its causes and addressing them with the logos, but I'm going to get out of it by switching roles. I'm going to be the one being the bully. It's like that expression, hurt people, hurt people. Do unto others as what was done unto you. But they know it's an act. And then eventually they have to conceal from the child that they're putting on an act. All right, let's keep going. There are two possibilities. Accepting the act and the performance as real, or rejecting the whole performance as a mere act. That's our choice. Interesting that it's just a two-thing choice. Just like we said that life is really a choice between, are you going to be a walking dialectic of the Pathologos, functioning in this kind of negative way towards yourself, your reincarnation, and to any other person? Or, choice number 2, become conscious. Become conscious that you're a walking dialectic and do it properly. You're going to be doing it anyway. Why not do it well? Equally so, we have two choices here. Accept the act and the performance is real, pretend it's real, or believe it's real, or reject the whole performance. This is all bollocks. You're all playing an act. It's not really as authentic as this drama. Oh, the drama. Oh, you're all yelling. Oh, people are throwing things. Oh my God, it seems so real. It's all an act. It's not real. Get over it. And accepting the drama as real as more significant than our. So yeah, if they're all getting hyped up about this nonsense, what about what you used to be wondering about? What about the quest you were on? What about what you have been learning and knowing about yourself from your own experience? Suddenly that is thrown out the window to accept this bollocks as real. So accepting the drama as real, the more significant than our own experience, we interpret. So we start a new kind of a game. We interpret all else in terms of it. So in philosophy, we learn about projection. In the cave analogy of the Republic, Socrates says we are imprisoned, not from birth, but from childhood. And we are chained to accept the shadows on the back wall of a cave as real. And in that analogy, he talks about how those shadows that we are chained to from childhood, not birth, come from things, man-made things, being carried on the heads of people passing by a fire on an overpass behind us. In other words, man-made images, man-made things, not real, not actually reality, being projected. Right? How many people do you know project? Ever met a human being before? Why do we project? Why can we not see things the way they are? Well, when we are reading this text, we are reading every word, word for word, and reflecting on it, so that we do not project. We don't want to project. We want to read it as is, which is a yoga. It's a spiritual method. Because if the spiritual method, if enlightenment is seeing reality the way that things are, we are practicing that by reading the text the way it is. And if our problems come from interpreting all else in reference to what we believe is real from this childhood man-made act drama, then another way of saying seeing reality the way it is stopping projecting. Ever notice that people project their problems, or they interpret all else in reference to their fundamental false beliefs about self and reality. That's called projection. Now we're learning where it comes from. So you could say we are improving on Plato, which is one of the things we read earlier in the text. We are returning to not just one philosophy among many, the way philosophy is taught at nowadays, where there is no truth, it's all a matter of dumb opinions. That's not true. That's ignorance. That way, that's what we are taught philosophy is. Opinions. So we are returning to true philosophy, which we call Platonic philosophy, but it's just the logos. There's no actual Platonic philosophy. If you use your mind to understand your mind, you'll reinvent Plato. We're returning back to the Platonic tradition, but we are returning back while adding something to it. So we're going back to the cave analogy, which talks about projection onto the wall of the cave, but now we're understanding why or how. So, as we said before, we are discovering the paradigm not only of solving human problems, but the paradigm of the psyche, the paradigm or the spiritual tradition. And if Plato falls short, that's fine. We can bring this understanding back with us. Notice it's not stagnant. If it was just imitation, then can't learn anything new. Ever been in a group like that? Ever been to a spiritual retreat with people whose tradition doesn't involve understanding, doesn't involve the logos? So they're just imitating? Ever tried to introduce the logos? Hey, by the way, you guys can actually improve your tradition by... No. We wouldn't want to sully our precious tradition. We must be the same. We can't change, because then anyone can say anything and get us to change. How will we know if it's a good change? We have to just do it the way it's always been done. That's bullshit. That's pathologos. You're blocked from the logos. To be stagnant in imitation. There's no room for development. Whereas what we are doing is literally developing Plato. We're understanding the cause of projection, which is in Plato's cave analogy. Okay, so we interpret all else in terms of this act, if we accept it as real. And in modeling ourselves in terms of what is presumed to be higher, we become less than ourselves. That is the tragedy. I don't want to eat a monkey. I don't want to be less than myself, but you do. If we accept it as real, not only does it become the cause of all of our projection, which causes our misinterpretation, our arguments, our not being able to communicate with loved ones and friends because we can't see what's really happening because we're just projecting. We also try to model ourselves on it because we think it's better than what we are. And so we sacrifice not only what we know from our own experiences, we're also sacrificing ourselves. Sacrificing knowing and self. It's right on the board. We, in accepting the act as real, we sacrifice So far we've got, we sacrifice our knowing based on our own experience. And we also sacrifice our being ourself. To model ourselves ourselves on what is presumed to be higher. That is sad. So notice, what do we sacrifice for the Pathologos? Knowing and self. What are the two levels of enlightenment? Knowing, which is, what's the ideal of knowing? The brilliant light of being, the second hypothesis. Everything all at once, knowingness, true knowingness. And what's the first hypothesis? The self. What are the two levels of enlightenment? The brilliant light of being or knowingness and the clarity and purity of the one self beyond even knowingness. The thing that has the knowingness, which is why even if we encounter knowingness in philosophy, we ask, what's having the experience? The two highest levels, the second and first hypothesis, the two kinds of enlightenment, the two greatest things you can ever be and experience, are sacrificed just based on this silly, simple drama, which is all a bullshit act being playing out by actors trying to hide from the child that they're just playing out an act, pretending to be all dramatic. This silly, simple, dramatic scene from our childhood is the cause of us sacrificing the most important things. That, if we pick up the game and develop, becomes enlightenment and that which is beyond even enlightenment. So this is why it's so important to learn this. We can go back to where we left off, because where we left off was our development along the logos to knowingness in the second hypothesis and the self in the first. That's our destiny. We were on a path to our destiny, and then we became enchained, to use the metaphor from the cave analogy, in childhood. Now, so Plato didn't explain the details, but that's what we're doing here. We're adding the details to Plato. We sacrifice knowingness and we sacrifice the self. So we sacrifice knowingness in order to... what do we do? So we sacrifice knowingness based on our own experiences. But did we sacrifice it in order to gain something? Let's reread it. Okay. No, it just says, in those early scenes, we must include the sacrifice of what we know through our personal experience. Okay, it didn't give us a in order to get thing. But we sacrifice, yeah, I guess if we think this is real, it's different than what we knew. I didn't know this was a good way of doing things. I didn't know this was real. This is not based on my experience. If I accept this as real, I give up what I actually know. And if I think this is greater than myself, then I'll model myself on it, so I presume it to be higher, and then I become less of my actual self. The tragedy. Okay, become less of ourselves, and we forcing our experience to fit a belief that is consistent with the themes of the drama. We force our experience to fit within the structure. Right? Now, that might be hard to understand, but think of a racist person. like really fundamentally racist as a pathologos. So in other words, reason and evidence can't change their mind. And they encounter something that should change their mind. Maybe let's say they're racist against black people. They encounter a black people who's really nice and kind and intelligent. Whoa! The mental gymnastics they have to go through to fit what they experience within the themes of their racist pathologos drama. It can be crazy. Well, crazy is the wrong word, because there is an irrationality behind what seems to be absurd. So it's not crazy, it's rational, but now we're understanding why. You met those people? Hey, Trump supporters, let's just be honest with this. You see the mental gymnastics they have to go through when they hear the facts about Trump? They have to fit their experience within the themes of their beliefs. And it's wild to see the copium and the mental gymnastics and the nonsense that they will have to do to try and there are comedy reporters who say, hey, by the way, Biden did this and that. And they're, oh, that's terrible. See, he's an evil person. And then they say, oh, by the way, that wasn't Biden, it was Trump. Whoa. Then they're in a tailspin. And then they'll go through all these different ways of somehow justifying it, making it fit in within their belief structure. And they put it on the Daily Show or something, and we all laugh. But it's not journalism. Why? Because it's not actually addressing the cause of that mental gymnastics. So nothing ever changes. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. That's not journalism, my friend. You should be addressing the cause of what you're reporting on. Which means any real journalism better be learning philosophical midwifery. Better be reading the book we're reading. So I hope there are some journalists reading this and they incorporate that into their job. So we do it too. We force our experience to fit beliefs that are consistent with the themes of our drama. Right? You ever really wanted to do something and you beat yourself up, oh, I'm no good, or no one likes me when I do that, but then you do it and you anyway because you've got courage or discipline, and then you get all this positive feedback, but it can be so hard to accept because it doesn't fit the themes of the bullshit drama that says that no one likes you or you're not good enough or something like that. No one wants to hear your voice. How hard it can be to accept that positive feedback because you are projecting and reinterpreting everything within the themes of the drama of this simple childhood scene. And yet it's so important for you to reach that goal. So your whole life is miserable and suffering and stuck because of that, even though it all comes down to just a silly, simple scene, which was all bullshit to begin with. It's all actors anyway. Isn't that wild? So what do we have it here? It is transmits a belief of such enormous consequences. That's what we're talking about. Whole life can be like that, stuck. Isn't that interesting? I think it's interesting. It's always interesting to find things that seem so complicated or so significant or powerful, enormous consequences. It's so interesting to see it simplified in just one thing. Like the one question you can ask someone, hey, you want to do what you're doing consciously or not? Like you want to actually master the art of the dialectic, or you want to be a slave to doing a dialectic anyway on the Pathologos? So simple. Why do people fight to the death for a loyalty to their own justice against the different team, the different family, the different country? It's just simply Pathologos. Why don't they do midwifery to discover and remove their false beliefs, and then do Platonic philosophy to find the truth about justice? Because the urge to imitate what we believe to be great from this act is more primitive and powerful than our desire to seek truth. So simple. I think that's interesting. As long as this structure is in place, I like that. Whoops. As long as this structure is in place, it maintains the Pathologos. So this whole thing, so long as this act is in place, the act you have to accept as real, you have to think is just, you have to sacrifice your own knowingness from your own experience. You think that this way of being is higher than you, and so you sacrifice yourself to try and be like what you presume to be higher. You project everything based on this. You reinterpret it against this model of this is actually true, and everything else is projected through that lens. All that, so long as that's in place, it'll maintain the Pathologos. How do those who transmit the Pathologos scene know when to enact the tragic drama? That's the next question. If our whole life can be miserable or painful or blocked or acting terribly unjustly, in whatever capacity we rise to power in this world, can be a parent, can be a boss, can be a leader, can be a petty capitalist tyrant, can be a politician, and doing it on a mass scale. All of this terrible injustices and the suffering we experience and inflict, all of the ignorance, all of the cause of our problems comes down to such a simple scene when we're young and dependent on some people. When we are young and we're dependent on people who still have their image of authority, and they put on this stupid act. They're pretending, they're cosplaying. It all comes down to such a simple childhood scene. Then we ask, how do those who transmit this scene keep this sickness going? How do they know when to enact it? The timing is significant. The consequences are the most devastating. Now, there might be another way of looking at it. Actually, it's devastating in one way, but another way it's very important, because otherwise we won't have the conditions to master the dialectic. We'll just be free to do side A of the dialectic. We'll be free to actually do the dialectic on truth and being and self and do the Parmenides, which is neat, but that's only half of the game. If self is. So the tragic and consequences and the incredible, enormous consequences and all human problems, it's terrible, but on the other hand, it forces us to do this. Side B, and dialectic has two sides. So if we keep that in mind, we can accept or see reality as just. In the short term, it appears to be very unjust because we're forced to have problems that you can only solve by mastering midwifery, which is this part. And you also have to be doing philosophy, which is this part, in order to surface that, in order to learn the ideas about actual truth and justice, so you can see that this isn't real. So you're forced to do both. And every time you are doing philosophy, you'll hit blocks, which you can only remove by doing this. So in one sense, it's the cause of all of the human tragedy and all the individual problems within your life. But in another sense, it's just. It forces you. You can't get away with just doing philosophy. You have to do the whole thing. And if physical life is temporary, but eternity is eternal, and our work is to go beyond even eternity, then you can say, well, maybe in the end it's worth it. It's worth being chained from childhood. It's worth developing a false imitation of truth and reality that we sacrifice our knowingness, sacrifice ourselves for, because it will force us to do side B of the dialectic to find out the implications of living a dialectic of what isn't true about self and reality and truth and excellence. So we know from our own experience what happens if we live this way, but also we master the art of the dialectic to find the unsuspected false belief by seeing the consequences in our life, by seeing how it plays out everywhere, by seeing how it affects our state of mind and way of being, and see how behind it is a false definition of ourselves. In other words, we're learning an art that we can take with us beyond this life, maybe even beyond eternity itself. So in that way, maybe we can see reality as just. And as we've been reading, we can't accept a reality if it's not just, which is why we're able to go back to this and say, hey, by the way, this act wasn't just. I'm no longer accepting it as real. So interesting. And it all hinges on this early scene. So now we're asking, hey, how do they time it? How do they know when to do this, play this act, so that it has this effect? Devastating effect, tragic effect, terrible effect. Unjust for them to be doing it, but in a global scale, just that it exists so long as we realize that we're in this game to learn the dialectic. So how do these people know? How do those who transmit the Pathologos scene know when to act the tragic drama? That's our cliffhanger for next time. That's what we'll be reading next time. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for the new members in the chat. Thank you for old members who are returning. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the conversation. And likewise, thank you for any comments you might leave on the YouTube channel. If you want to join the community, there's a Discord that you can link below that you can join. And I hope that you are puzzled. And I hope you're finding something fun and cool about this the same way I do. It's kind of fun making the complicated simple. And also gives you a single focus to reinterpret things through instead of the old negative ways until it becomes second nature and it's obvious, you're just seeing it. But that's the courage part, right? It takes a certain amount of courage and commitment. So the courage is seeing through this, realizing you're here to do the dialectic, realizing you are the self, realizing that your own knowingness and experience you have to pick up again. You're here to show yourself and know yourself, put words on yourself, reveal yourself. All of these things are rational that we are reading and understanding, but it doesn't feel right yet. That's why we need courage to do it anyway. Interpret your world through this logos you're reading until it's obvious and until we've addressed this and this no longer gets in the way. That's courage. And because it's so simple, we can be committed to it. We can hold on to it as a single focus. Hey, I'm going to see the world through the logos. I'm going to recognize that I'm a walking dialectic of the Pathologos, That's what that inner voice is. And I'm going to recognize it and say, hey, it's not real. It's not true. It's an act. I'm not listening to anything that diminishes myself or the integrity and justice of reality. Because it ain't true. The Logos says so. That's courage. And instead, I'm going to seek my highest goals. I'm going to take notes of any blocks that come up. And as I learn this midwifery, I'm going to use those notes as stepping stones, as guides, as clues to uncover the fundamental origin scene. Because all of my blocks, all of my projections, all of my tangents, all of my diminishments of self and my highest goals come from a single scene. That was just an act. So any negative state of mind and words that come up, I'm going to take notes, because those are breadcrumbs that will lead me back to that scene that I know I can address and I'm here to address. And even though it's hard, I'm going to have the courage to keep going. And do my best to look through the Logos at all times and recognize the Pathologos, which is a deviation from the Logos. It's a singular focus we can be committed to. Isn't that fun? Isn't that cool? Harmonize your soul to that. If you do, try it. As Pierre Grimes would say, try it for a month and report back. Let us know what happens. Let us know if you carry this as a mantra for a month. Make a mantra out of this. Make a puzzle out of this. Make a question out of this that you can hold on to. Carry it for a month. And let us know how you go. And next time we're going to read, how do they know when to enact the origin scene? See you next time. Thank you for joining me. Bye.